Now, we've talked about extinct post offices. Here's a little bit about another extinct business in the Gap. The extract factory started about 1904, although there had been ideas about it even before that. It was between Yankeetown Road and Lair's Run, where J. Smith owns the farm now. General Johnny Roller was a big promoter of that, and they expected to make 200 barrels a day of ooze or tannic acid, and that they use chestnut oak bark to make all that. This was a really boom for the local economy because, first of all, they had local labor to build a lot of these buildings. The main building there is brick, and they made the brick over in the brick field, sort of across the road from it. Then they needed people to saw up the lumber and do all the construction work. They employed factory workers. They had boarding house, so they had to have cooks for the boarding house. And they bought food from the local economy, from the local farmers. And then they bought a lot of bark from the local people. There was even a school at the extract factory, and they had preaching there. Clory Falk, if you remember him, his father was one of the preachers at that school. When operations ceased, then the company houses were moved out here to Broadway, and they took the bricks down and used them to build the pottery factory at Broadway. Or that's what I've been told. And this site, with all this construction going on and all these nice buildings, is a cornfield today. Now, in the old days, making a living didn't mean driving to Broadway or Harrisonburg 5 days a week for a 9-to-5 job. You had to scrounge and be creative of how you would make money and how you'd make a living. You would trade furs, like we talked about. If you had excess butter at your house, you could sell butter, and the local stores would hang on to that and then sell that at bigger markets too, like Fredericksburg. When you had your corn or wheat ground at the mill, then the miller would keep part of what you had ground, and then that was his share, or the pay for doing the milling. And then even 90 years ago, people were living off the land a lot. Like our mother grew up in the Fox Run suburbs, and her family had groundhog on the table quite often. When she married and moved to downtown Fox Run, she thought people at downtown were very wasteful because they shot the groundhogs and then just let the meat go to waste. Logging was a very big business in the Bronx Gap area. For a lot of different types of businesses, a lot of different jobs. First of all, you'd have to saw down those trees. And then you'd skin the bark and sell it at the extract factory or other places. You'd need lumber camps to process all those logs into the finished product. This is Israel Mungold's log camp in Monongahela. And it also provided not just jobs for the men, he-men type jobs, but women were employed there too for cooks. You see some women and children here. Our grandmother was a cook at a lumber camp, not this one, but I think Stokesville. And our grandfather helped out with the cooking because you needed somebody to keep the fires going, chop the wood, and lift those heavy pots and things like that. Another aspect was sawmills. So after steam engines came along, you could have portable sawmills, and there are a lot of articles about taking the steam engine to someplace to set up the portable sawmill. This is Isaac Arbuckle's Moyer's stave factory on Arbuckle Road at Bergton. Staves are the wooden slats that you use to make barrels and buckets. And then Manny Shoemaker had a chicken coop factory. I don't know how big that was. I don't have a picture. But he made chicken coops to sell. And then somebody had to take all this stuff to market. So this is Terry Falk taking a load of lumber out to Broadway. And you see that road? That's Route 259 right there. So you can see with all that dirt, it would be muddy, and with these heavy loads, it would be a problem to get your product to market. Mills were a necessity because everybody was basically a farmer. And you'd have to get your wheat, your cornmeal, and your buckwheat, your rye, and all that ground up so that you could use it. I think probably the biggest mill in Brock's Gap was the Falk Mill, which was right across from the Rueton Park right now. This building that's shown here was 1919, and it started out as it's always been a gasoline-powered mill. But before that, on that site, was a water mill, and you can still see the water race bringing the water from the river down past the mill. The reason I think it was one of the biggest, or was the biggest mill, was that the men who ran the water mill gave their occupation as miller instead of farmer. Most of the other millers were farmers first and millers as part-time. Then the Dove Mill, or the Whittick Mill at Burton, was the next biggest, I think. Originally it was built by the Dove family, and then when the immigrant Ulrich Whittick's family moved in, they bought a lot of the Dove's operations, including the mill. George Whittick, pictured here, was the last miller. He was Anna Lee Lance's father. I think that mill stopped in about 1912. It was at the corner of Germany River and Crab Run River. Crab Run. The Souter Mill in Crab Run was probably gasoline powered. See the automobile there? But there was probably a water mill there at an earlier time. And this mill operated till 1936. The Hutt Mill at Crider's stood right behind Crider's post office, behind and to the side a little bit. It was a water mill, but it also had backup of gasoline power too. Notice this water wheel is extra wide. When we were working on the Mills of Rockingham County books, we didn't see any pictures of any other water wheels that looked like this. Usually they're taller and thinner. So I don't know where they got their design, but it must have worked for them. In earlier time before the Hutt Mill, Jacob Lance and his family had a mill about half a mile further upstream on Germany River. They were smaller mills because just like the post offices or the schools, you didn't want to have to walk real far to get your grain ground. William Sylvius had a mill on Runyon's Creek. Carr Wetzel had a little mill right across from Kaplinger Church, Crider's. George Didymus Smith's mill was on Bennett's Run, and Charles Dove's mill was at the foot of the Shenandoah Mountain. I like this picture. Casper Moyers has just been to Carr Wetzel's mill, and he's holding his sack of grain, his sack of flour to take home. He's fording the Germany River right there. There were a lot of merchants, even from the very beginning of Brock's Gap settlements. This is Gertie Shoemaker's store over in not exactly Hopkins Gap, where would I say? It's on Hopkins Gap Road. Anybody know where it is? Okay, all right. I love the gas pump here. There was a trading post at Brock's Gap in the 1750s. In fact, when Fort Seibert was attacked by the Indians in 1758, they say that some of the men were across in Brock's Gap getting supplies, so that's why they were not there to protect the fort. We have a store journal from Michael Baker's store, 1800. He sold a lot of whiskey and a lot of brandy, but he also sold silk and velvet fabric, so it was quite a different operation than I had pictured in my mind. When my dad opened Falk's Run Grocery in 1949, there were 9 stores within a 4-mile radius of his new store. So that gives you an idea of how common country stores were then. And there's Pete and Nelma Custer, our Gary Custer's parents. They had a little restaurant in their country store. Blacksmiths were always needed for all the horse work and all the mules that were there, but then they also would have made nails and door hinges and fireplace utensils and all the other iron products that were necessary. Then later, a lot of the blacksmiths branched out to become mechanics when that was the time. Nathan Runyon had a mechanic shop or a blacksmith shop at Chimney Rock, and he invented and got a patent for these chains on the truck. I think that looks like hard tars on that truck. Now let's get back to people a little bit. We haven't mentioned the people much. Like Jed Hotchkiss wrote, a lot of the settlers there were Germans, but not from the same place, so I'm sure there were a lot of different German accents and dialects within the gap. After a while, those dialects sort of merged into one another, and the whole term became known as Pennsylvania Dutch, which doesn't mean Pennsylvania Netherlands, but Pennsylvania Deutsch, German. I checked around with some people trying to find out if anybody still could speak Pennsylvania Dutch, and I found Granville Moyers. He could still speak Dutch. He said that his parents always talked Dutch to them at home, and even when he's an adult, he and his brothers, when they would get together, would talk Dutch to each other. I thought that when Granville passed away, and then when his last remaining sibling passed away a couple years ago, I thought, well, the dialect's gone now, and I put that on a poster for Rock's Gap Heritage Day. But his daughters came to me in 2019 and said, oh no, we still can speak some Dutch. So they're standing in front of me and they proceed to sing the little ditty to the tune of How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? But it's in Pennsylvania Dutch. So Dutch lives on. We have a lot of sayings in the Gap. I heard a lot when I was growing up, and if you remember the folklorist John Heatwell, he would love to come to Brock's Gap Heritage Day and talk to the people, and then he would set up interviews and do oral history interviews with a lot of us. I already mentioned our saying about we're going out or we're going out the way. Here's a couple others that I was told when I was growing up. Now, some of these are maybe won't bring you good luck, but they're to help you avoid bad luck anyway. One of them is never pass anybody on the stair steps. Another one is don't go out a different door than the one you came in. I see heads nodding. That's good. Okay. Now, let's see if you know this one. This is one John Heatwell had never heard. And I was so proud that we had one that he had never heard. If someone gives you a plant, don't say thank you. That's bad luck. Say, I'll throw a rock in your garden sometime. How many people's heard that one? Okay, most everybody. All right, well, there's a lot more I could say about our superstitions and our practices, but that's another program too. Since today is Sunday, I thought it would be appropriate to close with a prayer. This isn't just any prayer, but it's a prayer that was a handwritten page on a Bible from the Fink family, and the Bible was dated 1855. I have copies out here on the table, so be sure you get one on your way out. This is a picture of the handwritten page. On this side is an explanation of the prayer, and this side is the actual prayer itself. When you read the explanation, it sounds sort of like a chain letter. You know, if you do it this, then you'll have good luck, and if you do this, you'll have good luck. All right, well, let me tell you some of the things that the explanation says. The explanation says that this prayer was originally found in 803, and the Pope sent this prayer with Emperor Charles into battle. If you pray this prayer every day, you will never die a sudden death, nor will you be drowned in water, nor will any poison have any effect on you. And there's even more. And if you read it over a woman in labor, she will be delivered safely and will be a glad mother. So be sure you take that home and follow those instructions. Okay, does anybody have any questions, or you want to add another story? Okay, well, thank you very much. I think it's always important to say, go home and write down your stories. Go home and label all your pictures so that 80 years from now we won't be wondering who so-and-so was. And we also always put in a plug for thank you for coming, thank you for the museum. I noticed there's a donation jar over there just waiting to be filled to the brim. So let's help out with that too. Thanks a lot.
Thanks all of you for being here. It's good to see you again.
John, it was good to see you.